So, the new version of the Psychic phase, or lack thereof, has been a hot topic since the announcement of 10th edition, and today on Warhammer Community we got our first look at exactly how psychic powers as well as morale is really going to work in the new edition of 40k. And first things first, for fans of big horde armies like Tyranids and Orcs, some of these changes you may really like. As you can see, they show off the turn structure, and it is confirmed in the article to still be one player turn at a time. There is still no alternating activations, which for a lot of people I know will be disappointing. It is a bit of a shame. I think that would have been quite a cool way to mix up the edition, but it does look overall as though things have at least been moved in a good direction by being condensed down. Now there is just the command, the movement, the shooting, the charge, and the fight phase. The psychic and the morale phase are gone, and that is because they have now been baked into those other phases. And as GW quite rightly assert, for some armies the psychic phase just felt like either a massive waste of time or was at the very least just incredibly boring and tedious. You basically just watched the other player cast a load of spells and abilities while you could do essentially nothing to stop them most of the time. But now it seems that the psychic powers that the units and models in your army have, they are still there, they are still in the game, they just happen at different times. So, for example, if you are using powers to debuff an enemy's ability to fight, that will likely happen in the fight phase. To help your army look into the future and maybe get some kind of reroll for a squad, that will probably happen in the command phase. So it just adds a bit more for players to do and interact with in each of those phases, rather than just pushing it all into one separate phase, which leads to, a good 5 or 10 minutes of the game where it's just essentially one player actually playing and the other one just sort of watching and kind of reacting as best they can. They show off the profile for the gorgeous new Terminator Librarian who we got to see yesterday, and as you can see on his profile, his smite spell is now locked in with his other ranged weapons. Now he can still fire his weapons in addition to using smite, it's not one or the other, but it all happens in the same shooting phase. And as you can see, smite is now either a 24-inch range D6 shot strength 5 minus 1 AP D3 damage attack, or you can instead attempt a focused version, which is slightly beefed up. It has the devastating wounds abilities and also higher strength and AP, but it comes at a risk, which from what they've said in the article either kills the bearer if you have a small number of wounds. It will probably still be something like Perils where it's on a 1 or a double 1, something like Plasma as it is now. So it either kills the caster, or at the very least, if you have a few more wounds, does a few wounds to them. So if you are a bigger monster or character, you will probably take D3 or D6 mortal wounds. If you are a weaker caster, like maybe an Astra Militarum one, it might just kill you outright. So there is still the perils kind of effect in the game. If you want to be safe though, you can just go for the weaker version and, presumably be less likely to have demons of the warp come and rip you to pieces. But it's nice that there is the two options now. It's not just seemingly a perils roll where you roll a double 1. You can choose to, in essence, overcharge it, much like Plasma now. So you can choose to really push it if you need to get that damage through, or you can just play it a bit safer and kind of harness the warp in a bit of a quote-unquote safer way. We also got a look at the new Psychic Hood, which is an insanely buffed up bit of gear now. Instead of just giving you a better deny, it gives a flat 4-up feel no pain against psychic attacks. But that's not just all, because it doesn't just give it to the model. If the Terminator Librarian is in a squad of, say, perhaps Toughness 5 Terminators, they also get that feel no pain. So this Librarian is going to be a huge force multiplier for something like a 10-man squad of Terminators to give them all a 4-up feel no pain against enemy psychic attacks. They also showed off another ability, Veil of Time, today, and when this is cast, if he is in a unit, the unit gets the Sustained Hits 1 ability. So with their Stormbolters, the Terminators could potentially be getting up to 8 hits each if they are within half range, which is a pretty terrifying prospect when they are also protected by a 4-up Feel No Pain against psychic powers thanks to the Psychic Hood. One of the Orc Psychers, the Weird Boy, is another whose stat line we get to see today. He's largely similar to now. He's toughness 5, 4 wounds. He has the new leadership value of 7. His staff looks to be the same in melee from what I can tell. It swings with 3 attacks at strength 8, so it is fairly scary. It's only minus 1 AP, but it does do D3 damage if it gets through. On the ranged front though, one of his psychic powers is the Edbanger power, which on the face of it does just seem like a bit of a worse smite. It's only 1 attack and only 1 damage, but it does have the precision rule, so this will very likely let you get some hits off into enemy characters in squads and, you know, potentially blow their head up before they can even get into combat or start really buffing their unit. The Warg energy buff is also back, and this is a hugely impressive way to buff that Edbanger power. Unlike now, where it lets you just cast another power if you have 20 or more boys in the squad, this now, if the Weird Boy is in a squad, lets you add +1 strength and damage for every 5 models in that squad. So in a full 30-man squad of boys, the Edbanger spell can now hit characters at strength 12 for a potential 7 damage. Now, you do gain the hazardous rule if you have a squad over 10, so you can potentially blow yourself up, but that's just really orky, and this, in theory, could just one-shot an enemy HQ choice while they're in a squad in just a devastating explosion of blood and gore and brains, and if that isn't, for me, the most orky thing ever, then I don't know what is, because just being in a big squad of boys, giving him all that orky energy, and then just blowing up an enemy librarian's brain is just the most awesome thing ever. And then trying it on another character next turn and blowing himself up, that's just peak orkiness. So I love that mechanic. The new Warg energy rule seems to be really quite strong for the Weird Boy. He also has the jump, which is one of the key sort of most well-known orc psychic powers. This is done at the end of the movement phase, and you roll a d6, and on a 1, this is very orky, the unit suffers d6 mortal wounds of course, but on a 2+, you can move that unit and set them up more than 9 inches away from enemies. So it's still very similar to how it works now, but this is just one of the best spells and abilities for getting your orc units all over the battlefield. Orcs are typically not super fast, although the Weird Boy has jumped to movement 6. I believe he's only movement 5 at the moment, so orcs may be getting a slight buff to their movement, but still being able to teleport all over the board thanks to the jump is one of the key ways for orc players to get their big blobs of boys across the battlefield safely. So I think it is going to be an ability that is still used by a lot of players almost every turn when 10th edition does drop. And then finally we look at the morale phase, which has also changed a heck of a lot. Gone is the end of the turn mechanic, and gone is more models running away. Instead, the morale phase is now done in the command phase, and you have to roll for each squad that is either under half strength or any unit that is under half its wounds. So yes, even a single solitary lone tank can now fail Battle Shock if it's under half wounds. The process has gone back to the 7th edition version of a 2d6 roll, but now you have to roll equal to or above your leadership. So remember, it's mainly 6 for Marines from what we've seen, 7 for the Orc Weird Boy, so it's essentially a 2d6 roll trying to beat or equal those values, and if you fail it, you are suffering from Battle Shock essentially. And this, as I said, isn't models running away anymore. So Green Tide players, Tyranid Horde players, Necron Silver Tide players rejoice, because this is going to mean your models just don't run away in droves anymore. But what it does do is bring some fairly hefty debuffs to your squad. Because now, not only do they lose all their objective control value, so you will have an impossible time holding any objectives with that squad, they also have to take a desperate escape test when they fall back, which they don't go into, but I'm going to assume this is a mechanic where if you want to fall back, you have to roll a dice for maybe every model in the unit, or you have to roll a set of dice, and if you fail that roll, you take extra mortal wounds, or some models do die. So I think there is still a way that models in squads can die like not in combat, but I don't think it's going to be in the battle shock phase. It's going to be because of this desperate escape test. So you have to do that whenever you fall back with the squad. So if you have failed battle shock, you really don't want to be falling back from the sounds of it. And then finally, what is possibly the biggest impact is you cannot use any stratagems to affect that unit. So this is going to massively impact their ability to do pretty much anything on the table. You're going to be severely hindered at taking objectives. You are going to be very penalized for falling back and trying to reposition a unit, and you are going to find it impossible to do any of the sneaky tricks or shenanigans that your stratagems may let you, because you just cannot use them on that unit. And presumably this will also mean you can't do like the generic stratagems as well as any key ones in your eventual codex. So you really will have a squad that can just pretty much do only what it can on the datasheet. There will be no other tricks or abilities or special powers that it will be able to bring out onto the field. So failing battle shock does sound like a fairly tough mechanic. Like, you do not want to be failing battle shock, definitely not on multiple squads. But on the plus side, for players of 30 strong boy squads or gaunt squads or whatever it may be, you won't just lose a swathe more models if you happen to have a few shot away by enemy firepower. So that is a huge win for swarm armies, in my opinion. And I think, as I said, Orc players, Necron players, and Tyranid players especially are in general going to love this new morale system. So that is it for today. A lot more teasers and rules shown off for 10th edition, and again, yet more streamlining, simplification, and just rules that make common sense. Like, everything they've shown off is just such a good common sense idea. They really do sound like they are going to make 10th edition so simple to play, so easy to understand, so fun to interact with, and just so much more straightforward and with less bookkeeping than any edition that at least I've played has been in the past. So I am a huge fan of this. The battle shock and the psychic phase rules seem to make a lot of sense, and I really like the fact they are now baked into a much more condensed turn order. So just in general, everything they've shown off today I think is a huge win. And as an Orc player, the new battle shock, it scares me in some ways, but not having 10 models extra run away from failing morale makes me really excited to run a green tide again. But what do you think of these rules? Do they sound like they're going to make 10th edition great to you? And what do you think is Green Tide and Tyranid Horde armies back on the menu? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you want to see more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.